this man to tears, and because he knew he'd never reach parole with 130 years. He was already middle-aged. And the judge, kind of seeing his remorse, kind of leaned over and with a benign smile said, "Well, you don't have to do it all." And his tears began to dry up. And the judge said to him, "Just do what you can." And that just, and what I wanted to emphasize on that was the fact that is that most of us are not going to get to do everything we'd like to do in our life experiences, and will not learn everything we'd like to learn. And I didn't know tonight that we're going to honor some people for some things that are going to be quite incredible, some experiences that in hard times that they were able to intervene and do great things. And so sometimes we have to ask God to provide us a little wisdom about how to apply ourselves each day. And we might ask this question: what do you want me to learn today? What would you like for me to experience? And what would you like for me to do? If we'll trust God with the curriculum of our lives, He generally gives us what we need to do and then teaches us those things as we go along in life. Made me think of a construction site in which these 3 construction workers were working very hard on a project around a building, and a stranger walked by and asked the first worker, "What are you doing?" And he says, "What's it look like I'm doing?" "I'm breaking rocks." And so the visitor, stranger, walked by and came along to the second fellow working in the ground, and he asked him, "What are you doing?" And the man responded, "I'm chipping stone for this stupid fence." He came along to the third man, and when he stopped the third man from his work, he kind of wiped his brow and looked up at the stranger, and he kind of waved towards this huge building, and he said, "I'm building a cathedral. Won't it be magnificent?" And so sometimes it's the perspective of the task that's before us that determines what that task can mean in life. The Scripture says in Psalms chapter 90, verse 12, "So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom." And if we do that as individuals, and we do that collectively as a city government, and we do that as a community, and especially some of those folks that are here tonight, what marvelous things we can do. And just as the Scripture says, teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. Psalm 90, verse 12. Let's look to the Lord in prayer. My Father, we are grateful tonight for this leadership that has assembled here for the citizenry of Haltom City. We thank you for the wisdom of so many citizens who have placed them into the offices that they hold. May we support them as they make deliberations and decisions in the best interest of the community at large. And we would pray for them that they would have that wisdom that you do promise in your word if we'll just lean upon it. And we'll thank you for these good things in Jesus' name. Could we stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. Next on the agenda is a couple of proclamations, and I'm going to let Fire Marshal Fred Knapp make an introduction here.
I'd like to take this time to introduce 2 gentlemen to you. The first one is Mr. Greg Donahue and Mr. Raul Ponce. It's not very often that we in the fire department get to stand before you and introduce 2 gentlemen like we are tonight. But as I said a few weeks ago at an event, Haltom City has had the worst that nature can throw at us this year, and has had the worst that people can throw at us this year. And on Saturday morning, September the 15th, I was in class, and I received a phone call that there had been a house fire where 3 young girls had been pretty severely burned. And then they began to tell me the circumstances about how the fire began, and and most of the people around here can understand not wanting to go into those details. But sometimes in the midst of very bad things, some of the best in people can come out. And before the arrival of the fire department, these two gentlemen went to the house and made 3 successful rescues of the 3 girls. Without them being there at the time they did and doing the actions that they performed, the outcome of that fire would have been much worse. Unfortunately, there were 3 girls. The youngest one did pass away several days later. But without the actions of these 2 gentlemen, there would have been 3 funerals for that family. So we would like to take this time tonight to honor and recognize these 2 gentlemen.
Thank you, Fred. And gentlemen, your days, at least on September the 15th of this year, were well numbered, and we thank you, and we want to recognize both of you through these certificates of recognition, which I'll now read. Whereas on Saturday, September 15th, 2007, a tragic event happened in Haltom City House. And whereas 3 sisters were doused with gasoline and set on fire by their mother, and whereas Raul Ponce and Greg Donahue, Haltom City citizens, responded immediately to the call for help, and whereas without regard for their safety, Raul Ponce and Greg Donahue entered the house and found 3-year-old Ariana Green, the youngest of the 3 sisters, in a hallway, and brought her out of the burning house. And whereas while her 2 older sisters did live through the tragedy, Ariana could not survive the burns that covered 90% of her body. And whereas the heroic efforts of Raul Ponce and Greg Donahue should be commended. Now therefore I, William Lanford, Mayor of the City of Haltom City, Texas, and on behalf of the City Council and all of our citizens, wish to publicly recognize, thank, and honor Raul Ponce and Greg Donahue for their unselfish and valiant efforts to save the lives of fellow human beings. Raul, congratulations, sir. Thank you. Greg, thank you. Thank you. Next on the agenda tonight is the announcement of events. That's Assistant City Manager Chuck Barnett. Chuck?
Thank you, Mayor, Council, ladies and gentlemen. The community is invited to attend the Christmas on Broadway celebration, which is the Haltom City tree lighting ceremony, which is set for this Saturday, December the 1st, at the Recreation Center. The fun will begin at 4 p.m., will feature elementary school choirs, games, crafts for kids, a 40-animal petting zoo, which is new for this year, a presentation by the Fort Worth Zoo, which last year the Honor Guard presented from the Fort Worth Zoo a penguin, which is extremely popular, carriage ride, train rides, and of course Santa Claus will be there. There will be no admission charge. The finality will be the official lighting of the tree, which will be around 6 p.m. And then the mayor, along with help from Santa and Mrs. Claus, will do the tree lighting, although you may not need any help, but they'll be there to assist. The Haltom City Police Association is now collecting food and gifts through the Gary Hires Memorial Toy Drive and the Christmas Providers Program to benefit those in need. Each year, many families feel the stress of providing Christmas for their children. Non-perishable food, new unwrapped toys, toiletries, and other items are being collected and will be distributed during the holidays. Last year, 233 children were recipients of a very Merry Christmas due to the generous keeping the spirit of Christmas by everyone. Collection boxes will be located at the Haltom City Law Enforcement Center, the Recreation Center, and the reception area here at City Hall. Those who would like to help, as well as those in need of assistance, should call 817-222-7000. You may call for an application for assistance or stop by the Law Enforcement Center at 5110 Broadway to pick up an application. The public is also invited to tour the Haltom Family Mansion from 7 to 9 p.m. on Saturday, December the 8th, and also from 2 to 5 p.m. on Sunday, December the 9th. The Saturday night tours will feature a wine and cheese reception, and then on Sunday, light refreshments will be served. This is a fundraiser, and donations are being accepted for the tours both Saturday and Sunday. All proceeds will benefit the Birdville Historical Society, a nonprofit educational and historical preservation group. For reservations, which are strongly recommended, please call 817-222-7767. Also, the Fort Worth Transportation Authority will once again include Haltom City in its Tour of Lights set for Saturday and Sunday, December the 8th and 9th. The tour will feature several blocks of decorated homes in the Diamond Oak subdivision. Children and their parents are welcome to participate in holiday activities, which begins at the stockyards, Fort Worth Stockyards, from 5 to 6 p.m. each evening prior to getting on the bus. Cost for the tickets is $5 for riders who are older than 5. Children 5 years old or younger are free. The first buses are expected to reach Haltom City around 6:15 to 6:30 p.m. Last year we had 40 buses tour Haltom City. The annual Christmas dinner for Haltom City elderly and needy will take place from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Saturday, December the 8th at the Haltom City Senior Center. Food and fellowship will be offered. Shut-ins who cannot attend the gathering are encouraged to call Bobby Arthur at the Senior Center to schedule meal delivery. The phone number is 817-834-8021, and the center is located at 5000 Bernice Street. We've got quite a bit of activities coming up for the 8th and 9th.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Would you repeat the number for the reservations? Is that for Saturday night and for Sunday?
You're talking about
for the tour, for the Haltom Mansion tour? By the way, which we thank the Haltoms for this. This is I think a rare event.
That is 817-222-7767, and the Haltom Mansion is located right off 377.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I want to make one other announcement right quick, that Councilwoman Diane Branson is not here tonight due to a family emergency. I want to let everybody know about that. Oh, is Wayne gone? Oh, okay. Well, our city attorney is missing as well. Thank you. Thank you, Tom, for being here. Okay, next we have the capital improvement status report, and that'll be brought to us by David Fain. And you've got some guests with you?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I'll make my presentation very brief. We also have Mr. Jack Tidwell from the North Central Texas Council of Governments who's going to update you on the Big Fossil Creek Consortium study. And Mr. Chuck Barnett, our Assistant City Manager, will also update you on the library. And with that said, I'll go ahead and do my report. We'll start off with street, update you on our street overlay program. We are about 30% complete with our street overlay. We are overlaying actually 26 streets, and we're about 30% complete. The council did award this contract back in August of this year, and we should complete this particular project by the end of this year. Some more street projects, of course, is our CDBG projects. We have two. One that is actually our last year's project, which is the reconstruction of Woods Lane. The council did award this particular contract in September of this year, and the project's moving rather slowly due to the fact that our other utility companies have to relocate their utilities before we can get in and do our work. So the project is moving rather slowly, but we anticipate completed this project in June of this year, or June of '08, excuse me. The council did award a engineering services contract for the reconstruction of Dana Drive from Denton Highway to the end, it should be, not Beverly. And this is this year's CDBG project, and you did award an engineering services contract to Tignall and Perkins in September of this year. The council did also award at the last meeting a contract to reconstruct Beverly Drive from Webster to Vicky, and the bid amount was $942,000, and that will be getting underway hopefully sometime in January of next year. Water sewer projects. The Diamond Oaks Sanitary Sewer Project is moving forward. This is obviously in line with what we try to do on an annual basis, and working on our sewer system. This is a project that is replacing approximately 2,000 foot of deteriorated sanitary sewer, and we're about 40% complete with this particular project. Of course, our Little Fossil Creek improvements, I think the council's been aware of this for a number of years, and the council at their August 27th meeting of this year did approve a contract with the Army Corps of Engineers to move forward with this project. And I'm not here to say it's bogged down, but we're still trying to negotiate a couple contracts with an engineering firm to help us purchase the property and to also relocate a sanitary sewer line. But we'll, hopefully in January we'll come back to the council with some contracts for your review and approval. With that said, we'll go ahead and I'll introduce Mr. Jack Tidwell. He may want to introduce his staff, and he'll update you on the Big Fossil Creek study.
Thank you, David. Mayor, Council, I'm pleased to be back up here again to talk about our Big Fossil Creek study. I'd like to introduce an important staff person, Audra Valamides, our Engineer 2 at the Council of Governments, who's spent quite a bit of work since our last meeting, and of course Michelle Thrift from the Army Corps of Engineers, our staff counterpart with our federal partner with that. With that, if I can, I'm going to have Audra advance the slides for me. And as you're aware, we have been, the Council of Governments is very committed to serving our member local governments in a variety of ways, one of which is looking into the future and trying to identify the goals of what we want to see our region look like, what we want the conditions for our communities to have the benefit of into the future. This is our Trinity River Common Vision program. As a part of that, we very much want to promote a safe, clean, enjoyable, and natural and diverse stream corridors throughout north central Texas. The Trinity has, obviously, as the major water feature in the north central Texas region, is a very big part of my department's and my agency's activities. We have, as a part of that, launched a partnership, I think a very productive partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Fort Worth District, and Southwest Division. What they've allowed us to do back in the late 80s was to develop a feasibility study by which our local governments would receive cost share benefits in a nationally supported Upper Trinity River feasibility study. And the 5 purposes we were able to iron out with the Corps of Engineers, and I think it has allowed us to do a lot of creative things, include flood risk reduction, water quality protection, environmental restoration, recreation, and other allied purposes, kind of the kitchen sink. These purposes recognize the the very complex and multifaceted nature of our watersheds as they relate to water quality, how the water flows through them, and how the watersheds themselves change over time. Next slide. Big Fossil Creek resulted as a part of that larger Upper Trinity study, and its vision was to create a cooperative multi-objective study that lived up to the Trinity feasibility study by looking at a very specific and a very interesting watershed, and that's Big Fossil. Our project goals have always been to stabilize and reduce future floodplain impacts to help stabilize that flood risk. And through the study, offer recommendations of stream management and other opportunities to cost share with the Army Corps of Engineers. That the stream bank stabilization is obviously a very important part. I dare say that Haltom City and is just a great example of a majority of the communities, if not all the communities in North Central Texas, who are having issues with stream bank management and stream bank stabilization over time. This slide is a particularly interesting slide. It looks at a snapshot in time from 1995 to 2005. And I would dare say that if you looked at the current land use, you'd see even more a stark difference in the amount of development that has occurred over that time. All that development does have an impact in terms of how water flows, what quality of water flows through the area, and how many people find themselves in the area of risk. We've had quite a few additional goals that have to reflect that multi-objective approach I just described in terms of identifying ecosystem restoration opportunities. We've very much appreciated the Army Corps of Engineers' flexibility. After all, they're the Corps of Engineers are very much about floodplain management and flood risk reduction, but they have exhibited a great deal of partnership and a great deal of creativity in understanding that our watersheds and our streams serve a variety of functions, and these functions can be maximized to benefit each other in terms of making sure that you have open space opportunities or recreation opportunities that can benefit an infrastructure purpose. Next slide. The way we set up in the year 2000 when we got started with the Big Fossil Creek study was the Council of Governments interacted with all our locals to execute agreements, interlocal agreements, where the Council of Governments operates as the local sponsor on the city's behalf with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We have basically set up I think a very innovative structure which included elected officials in terms of our policy committee, our staff level technical committee, and then a Big Fossil Watershed Stakeholders Committee. I'll come back to that later on in the comments to tell you where we are in terms of those committee activities. The last time we came to you was a challenge to talk to y'all, because we had been in a process over many years trying to get to a point where we could have a report to get to y'all. I appreciate your input. I appreciate your enthusiasm. That's a polite way to put it. And we've put the resources where they were needed and worked closely with the Army Corps of Engineers to get the draft information paper out to you not shortly after our last presentation to y'all. Currently, it is in the hands of all the 9 local government participants, and they are reviewing it for the projects that were preliminarily identified, for flood damage reduction, environmental restoration, and those recreational opportunities. Where that whole process generated a baseline of information, which is now at a point where we are asking for input among the players to give us, help us formulate the recommendations for the next step. That information includes watershed characteristics and economics, basic environmental information, and in terms of the Army Corps of Engineers, a very important, the very complex hydrology and hydraulics study that was done to analyze the creek. As a matter of fact, I think we actually are passing off 2 DVDs of information tonight to city staff. Getting back to the state of where we are in terms of the committee structure and next steps, we have this report out. We're looking for all comments to be delivered by the technical committee back to us next month. We'll redraft an information paper and get the next level of policy plus that stakeholder committee group presented with this information shortly thereafter. I can't go too far without thanking the Texas Water Development Board. In terms of the cost share our local governments were able to benefit from, in addition to the 50-50 cost share between the Fed and non-federal partner, the Texas Water Development Board picked up half of that local share. So the Water Development Board is an enthusiastic partner. They do have public meeting requirements, and you'll be hearing about how we're fulfilling those public meeting requirements in the upcoming months as well. When we released the material and information paper to staff, and I believe we actually did it right here in Haltom City, we were very pleased with the response and interest of staff in a variety of next steps. We think that this rescoping step will be a very important decision point for all local governments to say really demonstrate what projects have interest at a local level, so we know where to spend resources. And we know where if some communities don't have any interest in moving forward, that's fine, but we're pleased to think, at least on a first blush basis, our local governments have responded well to the information we've been able to provide them. Ultimately, however, what we all want to do is find feasible projects that can go into design and construction. That's what the study was all about to begin with, and recognizing in order to take advantage of this unique opportunity for cost share leveraging, we have to go through the very stepwise process that's associated with the Army Corps of Engineers, and that will take us ultimately to design and construction. Next slide. We have several projects that are very specifically associated with Haltom City. Obviously, the year has been a very tragic year in a lot of ways. We've made a lot of progress. The projects that are most prominent for Haltom City include our skyline structural or non-structural evaluations to at least assist with that effort and move that situation forward. Also, Fenway Court and the erosion issues being studied very well. I know that there's a lot of independent, or at least one other independent activity going on. We've already handled several phone calls to coordinate with that effort and provide any information we could, because we certainly want to make sure that we're providing all the assistance we can there. Also, there's some environmental restoration activities and recreation potential for North Park and Buffalo Ridge Park. That's also currently listed in the report. I want to thank you for the opportunity to come and give you an update and answer any questions you might have. I may rely on Audra or Michelle to help me answer them, but I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Tidwell. Ms. Reese.
I jumped right on that. I was waiting for that questions. In your presentation, you talked about public meetings, and I understand that's going to be down the road, but how far down the road? Because I don't think some of these issues we can keep waiting down the road.
Okay.
And I'm very anxious to hear something, and then also, you know, the time frame, of course, on the design and construction. Which, my theory, if I could do it the way I want to do it, because I want what I want and I want what I want now.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to do design and construction today, right now, and I want to give some relief to the citizens that have endured all of this frustration and pain, because like we had found out that last time, it's been 20 years in the making. I understand there's a lot of stuff going on, but we've got homes flooding in one area, we've got homes falling in another area, and the homes that are falling is an area I wanted to, one day I was wanting to move into one of them, and can't say I'm grateful I didn't, because I still like the house. So I'm looking at time frames. I want to give some.
I can give you a local sponsor goal without having the benefit of receiving all the comments from the technical committee. We're looking forward to an end of January, February time frame. I'm not feeling anybody hit me from my staff, so I think
meetings?
that's heading towards that, yes, ma'am. I would say February would probably be the most conservative outlook
Okay.
for setting that up.
And then you mentioned something about the 9 different,
Well, there's 9 communities who
That's it.
represented in the watershed who are all participating in the study.
and what 9 communities are we referring to? Roughly.
Right now, Haltom City is one of those 9.
And they're not all municipalities.
Well, there is a portion of Tarrant County
Right.
in the top of the watershed, but all those communities are at the same stage the city of Haltom City is in terms of having the information, being able to review it. Already, I think significant changes and recommendations have been being very helpful in looking at the data and creating even a better document. We're just going to have to work through that process. I know that staff has been out been in intense discussions with the city staff that's been involved, and we'll continue that so we can wrap it up as quickly as possible.
Okay, in your feasibility study of these specific projects, I'm going to go outside the box in the sense of Skyline Mobile Home Park, Banner Mobile Home Park, and Fenway Court, in theory, was built in areas it should have never, from my understanding, should have never been put there. Is this feasibility study going to prevent us from making the same mistakes for future citizens? I mean, and this will probably be way after my time. You know, it might be my granddaughter's time, and
Well, I appreciate your sentiment and your comment. I think the state of the art has definitely changed over time. We recognize that, and we're recognizing that in our study and understanding that the approach to stream bank stabilization and flood risk reduction has changed over time. We now recognize that a structural approach may not be as attractive or on its own. It may be a part of an overall approach, but it's starting to be doubtful whether it's the only thing that needs to be done without creating problems either later on down the road or further downstream or further upstream. Those are lessons I think we've documented and have learned a lot about from Big Fossil Creek. One of the elements that the Council of Governments, while there was a delay and we were trying to make as much progress as we could given the circumstance, our agency has really created several good tools in relationship to stormwater management. And one of our approaches is called integrated stormwater management. Because of the opportunity that Big Fossil provided us, we were actually able to do several lab studies, which are included in this report, that document how different strategies in terms of development styles and stormwater management styles, how they can either impact overall watershed quality or benefit overall stormwater qualities. There's some interesting changes there about how development is programmed and decisions get made and what designs are preferred. But I think that this will add a lot of fuel to the discussion of how decisions like that get made, and hopefully we've taken the discussion to a new level.
Mr. Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Tidwell and folks. I appreciate you coming and making another report to us. Obviously, coming in August and then coming back again in November does show good faith, and I appreciate that. However, I glanced over the report. It was put at our disposal, and I glanced over it. There wasn't much of a study in demographics in that report as much as there was the structural study, as you just pointed out. And I'm wondering how much study of demographics with respect to population growth, and all the predictions are that this area is going to get bigger, especially this corridor that you pointed out here, with respect to developers and how much control you have over developers. Because I think that lends to that is something that we don't have control over as a local municipality. And so we can't control what other people do, and I think that causes erosion factors to step up the pace, if you will, and so on and so forth. So wonder how much you guys have put demographics in your studies too.
In terms of the composition of our study so far, we've been focused on an approach that is acceptable, that it's familiar to the Army Corps of Engineers. As the Council of Governments, we are very much involved with the demographic analysis of the entire region. Those ISWIM studies did take into account and will continue to take into account some of the different demographics and land use assumptions. I think it's a great comment. I think if there's specific information that we can provide that we have available to us, we'd be happy to include that and try to represent that analysis better. But if there's other information that needs more study, now is a perfect time to say, what about this factor, and can you study it additionally? I think that's a great comment, and we'd be happy to entertain that discussion even further.
I guess the point that I wanted to make was how much control does the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and even NetCog have over the developers that are not in our immediate area here? Because okay. Developers have a lot to do with why the erosion factors, for instance, in Big Fossil Creek has increased, has stepped up the pace, if you will, and that's why I ask about the demographics.
Well, in light of that, staff reminded me that there might be an answer to some of your questions in terms of an appendices that's attached to the document, in terms of some basic information. I would say that the Council of Governments position on those watershed development patterns, that's very much a local government-driven type process. Our goal is to try to provide as much information to your council, your staff, in addition to all the other councils and staff to the region to say there may be better ways of development or better ways of understanding the future impacts associated with stormwater and erosion. We hope to provide those tools through projects like this as quickly as possible.
Mr. Sutton.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Mr. Tidwell, thank you so much for the work that the staff has seen and the council's been able to see that you guys have been doing in the last 6 months. It's pretty good. Unfortunately, we still have the problem out there, right. and the problem that's out there from that perspective hasn't shown any progress yet at this point other than some regression. But brings me to next year, whenever resources are considered. You'd mentioned limited resources in your speech, and my ears perked up because you were talking about resources. So let's project a little bit in the future. What resources should we be anticipating to address some of these issues next year?
Okay. The stage of the study in terms of this information paper was to, early on designed the process with several checkpoints. Took us longer to get to one checkpoint than we wanted to, but those checkpoints were to say, are all the partners around the table interested and want to go forward? Because obviously if there's only one member of the watershed, community in the watershed wanting to go forward, the calculus changes. Sure. So we built these steps. Right now we feel like we have that list of preliminary alternatives to ignite that discussion to see what interests there are to move out on particular activities. Now, some communities may have an interest in a very location-specific erosion stabilization project. I don't know. I can't speak for the Corps and how they'll respond to that. They obviously have a very precise way they determine federal feasibility or federal interest. Okay. But our local governments have the same opportunity. The report includes several of those site-specific activities, but it also includes several watershed-wide activities. So where, for example, if there was an interest in an activity that said would organize flood warning, for example, to understand that as quickly as possible, if there was a storm event that moved through the upper portion of the watershed, and we could recognize it as a danger ahead of time to make sure we had low water crossings closed down and people moved out of harm's way, that may be something we come back to you and say, is there support, is there interest in participating in moving that particular idea forward? The same thing with the communities along the Trinity have for many years now, I think we're in our 15th or 16th year, have participated in a cooperative development process which says each one of the local governments can make floodplain permit decisions on their own, but they will utilize a stepwise process that says all the other members of the watershed or of the corridor group have a chance to see it prior to the city making the decision.
I see.
That's been extremely helpful in making sure that we have a fully informed watershed. And if there is a bad idea, it's not going to prevent, by the procedure, a city from making any decision that they choose, but it will say everybody knows ahead of time that City A is choosing to do something that City A opposes. And that's a very powerful tool if it ever gets to the point of litigation.
I see. So in terms of resources, the mix is still going to be mostly, what I'm hearing out of what you said, a local initiated.
Well, what the local governments choose to pursue,
Right.
the Council of Governments will
Get behind.
continue to attempt to find as much cost leverage from the federal sponsor and the state Texas Water Development Board,
Working with the Corps of Engineers.
working with the Corps of Engineers to move forward on those projects.
Okay. Okay. And you'll have a more firmer idea of what those resources might be for the specific projects as we get into next year.
Correct.
All right. Thanks.
Mr. Tidwell, can't let the night pass without asking, and that's a great segue. Is there any such leverage that you've been able to apply to find any funds to do an immediate or nearby fix for the erosion issue that's threatening Fenway? We had previously asked that, and I just, like I say, I just feel like I need to ask you publicly that and see what your response is.
Mayor, we continue to shake that tree. Since the last discussion, we have had several conversations with our friends with the Federal Emergency Management Agency and tried to support their information outreach for damage, where we'll continue to look for ways to incorporate Haltom City's, or at least assist Haltom City in addressing an opportunity that's called Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and provide whatever information we can there. The Army Corps of Engineers obviously is, as you've heard before, is limited in somewhat in their ability, but we continue to shake every tree. I think one of the opportunities that may be coming up, again, I don't have any information on it right now, is approaching the Water Development Board to see if they have any grant opportunities as quickly as possible. So far, they have just not shown themselves.
Sure, and I appreciate that. The other thing I want to just make sure I understand, because I don't know that in all the conversation that took place tonight that it was made clear, but I certainly appreciate where Councilman Hutchison was headed. And that is, and you pointed out that municipalities along the big fossil drainage area make their own decisions independently, and what you're saying is the municipalities and the groups that are within that consortium here are at this time independent actors and make their own decisions regardless of whether anybody downstream is affected or not. And obviously you know where I'm headed, because in that picture, in fact, if you would run that picture of the water drainage area there again, yeah, right there. If you'll notice, Haltom City is sort of on the narrow end of that, where that's where it all accumulates, that little funnel there, and it comes right through Haltom City. So we have a real big interest in where all that water comes from, and because we know where it's going to go. It's going to go right through Haltom City. Is that something that you could help us with to get some buy-in? Obviously, as you pointed out, this 2005 map is already outdated. I mean, they're throwing up houses like crazy out there, and that has impact on us. And is there some way that we could have some buy-in there from those folks?
That's a great question. I do want to make note. Michelle wanted me to reserve some time for her, but in answer to your question directly, Mayor, we feel that Council of Governments is all about protecting that local independence, but providing enough information and coordination to where communities can understand the upstream and downstream neighbor relationships that are associated with watersheds.
Sure.
I think this could not have this project. I know it's not as fast as we'd like it, it's not as perfect as we'd like it, but we already have seen the fruits of cooperation from communities up and down the watershed in just getting this far in the study to understand the watershed more effectively. There's a great more potential for continued coordination and communication to address some of those very important issues. I would just point out, for example, that integrated stormwater management approach that's documented in this report was spearheaded by the community leaders in the city of Fort Worth, in addition to many other cities throughout the region. The city of Fort Worth has been one of the first implementers. They're in the first stages of implementing that program to really address how the development and its relationship to stormwater performs over time.
Sure.
And it's definitely been a benefit already. So I would say
well,
that
I appreciate you pointing that out because I want to hurry up and say, while we're on the subject, I'm not accusing anybody of anything.
Okay.
There's certainly no need for Fort Worth or Keller or any of the guys up north of us to defend themselves. I'm just saying that, pointing out the obvious here that.
But where there can be
water,
benefits.
that water does roll through Haltom City. We have certainly a genuine interest in how fast it does that, and so I appreciate your comments there, and thank you very much.
Michelle?
I wanted to comment a little bit more on that as well. One of the things that Audra and I have been very pleased with is, and I can't commit any of these cities or communities, but even the furthest up north of the watershed have been willing, because they understand that everything does run downstream, when we've talked about the COGS CDC program. So that is something very promising, because at least we are making progress with looking at watershed-wide problems versus individual problems. Regarding your question on the developers and what controls do we have, there isn't a whole lot of controls, but the Clean Water Act does provide provisions in Section 404 to allow us to regulate certain activities. And the change that's occurred over the past 10 years, in my opinion, has been we are looking much more at cumulative effects. Instead of allowing them to piecemeal a project, we make them look at much farther out. So hopefully, as time progresses, we will see, changes in, knowing what's going to happen and stopping it before it becomes problems. Getting back to resources, on the federal side, I'd like to just say that we are in a continuing resolution, so I can't give you a concrete answer, but I think that we would, definitely follow up. What? I gave you an answer. Anyway, but when we do come out of continuing resolution, we'll have a much better idea regarding that area. And as unpopular as this statement is going to be, I just want to be very realistic so that we're managing expectations. On the area of Fenway Court, because it is private property, it really does limit what the Corps of Engineers can do. However, we're trying to be very innovative. We're trying to look at doing like ecosystem restoration on an entire reach, which would, hopefully eliminate some of those problems, but not create it somewhere else. But that wouldn't be a quick fix. The one thing that I know that we can do is if we get some grant money from somewhere else and they are able to construct some
structure that would prevent some of this, we are going to be able to expedite that regulatory review process for the Section 404 permit. And lastly, we're guilty about across this nationwide. During droughts, we have allowed people to build in areas that we just know now that are not a good area. So we are going to work very hard to have cities, communities enforce the floodplain, limits, so that in the future we don't have this problem, and that's going to take everyone working together, and that's why, the watershed-wide approach is very important with working with this particular, and especially, Haltom City is at the low end of that. Everything does flow downstream, but I think the momentum right now has changed, and we are seeing a lot of promising, people, even if they don't have a big portion of this watershed, they are willing to at least participate and look at watershed-wide developments in their community to make sure that they're being good neighbors.
Sure.
And did I cover all the questions? Okay.
Thank you very much. And I want to reiterate while we're at it again that we appreciate our neighbors, and we know that everybody wishes us well. On the Corps and COG and all of our neighbors, we understand that and we appreciate that. We just have obviously a duty here to ask the questions that we think our citizens want us to ask, and to get as straight an answer as we can, and I think that you guys have done that, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. David?
Next will be Mr. Barnett, and update you on the progress of the library.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, ladies and gentlemen. This is the third in the series of the presentations we brought to you on the aspects and the ongoing construction of the Haltom City Library. What you see before you, go ahead and hit that, David, thank you. What you see before you is a virtual look at what I presented once before when we were looking at the conceptual design and drawings for the library, for its design and what the look of the library would look like when we're finally finished. We're continuing to do site visits, having the bi-weekly progress meetings. Those meetings involve myself, the city engineer, project manager with F&S, who is the construction manager for the project. And as we see development there, we're on top of it. If we see problems, we're addressing those immediately. Go ahead. What you're going to see now is a series of slides that I'm going to show you that are going to give you the southwest, the north, and the northeast view. The aerial photographs provides a very good view of the building, but if you look at these, you can see what we're doing. I've told you about the hollow core floor panels, which have been installed. Those were the hollow veins you see for the flooring. The tilt wall panels have been installed. Those were done on site, and those have been put up. And as you're looking at this, you can see the support structures, which will also be the support beams for the roof. The tilt wall, what I was asking about is you've got these poles up there that's holding up the tilt wall, and I've never seen tilt wall construction or watched it being done. So what keeps them up after they've already set up and everything? Well, it's kind of like a house of cards. When you make that, the roof is the stabilizing factor that'll hold in the walls, even though it's welded to the base, and they're welded to each other with some metal plates. So once the whole thing is completed, then they'll put the roof on, then they'll remove the poles, and we'll see if it still stands. And that's supposed to be a joke. I didn't mean that for anybody to take that seriously. But again, this does show you what the tilt walls are looking at. If you look at the site today, you go by, you can see all those have gone up, and they're preparing right now for the finishing of the concrete pours for the rest of the parking lot. One last slide, if you would. So when you look at the overall view of it, our next scheduled events is to install the structural steel, which is the roof, and you saw the poles that were going up. They're going to be the stabilizing factors for the roof to be installed. The contractor's goal is to have the outer building envelope, as we refer to it, completed so that the interior work can start beginning after January 1st. You're seeing now the aspects of the walls and everything coming up, and you can see the blueprint of what it looks like, and then we'll start on the interior. We're completing also the utilities, which are underneath the building. Remember, it is a pier and beam. We will have a crawl space underneath there so we can move data terminals, phone jacks, and et cetera without having to drill through the concrete floor. And then the hollow cores that we showed you that were there, that was agreed upon to put that type of stabilization in for the flooring, because on top of that we're going to pour a 2-inch slab of concrete on top of that, which will be the final flooring to which all the books and the shelves and the furniture and et cetera will be sitting. And then again, as I said, the goal is to start the internal work after the first of the year, because we're trying to get as much completed for the outside of the building and the roof on so we can start doing the interior before we get into bad weather. So what's up next? Well, we've had a couple of meetings on interior signage. There's going to be a lot of signage that's going to identify where people are going to go in the library once they go through the doors. We've had already one meeting and looking at the furniture for the interior of the building. As a matter of fact, Leslie and I are going to Dallas tomorrow to meet with F&S and their design to look at furniture one more time. So we're moving some of the things that are going to be involved for the interior of the building, where you're seeing the construction going on for the exterior of the building. The other thing, as far as the development of the park, as you notice, if you look, it's kind of at an odd angle, but I'm calling it kind of the southern portion where you have the open area near McLean, which is the park area, to what to do with that area. And we've talked about putting a gazebo in there, maybe some soccer fields which can be removed so we could have outdoor events and et cetera. So we're still trying to work on the open space for that area. However, if you look to the north, I've seen another opportunity, because from the base of the floor to the crest of the creek, you have a 10-foot drop, which would create, which is the glass area you see at the bottom of the screen, which gives you more of an amphitheater effect, where you could have outdoor events on the outside of there with the sound or presentation, et cetera, reflecting off the glass. So I'm kind of playing with this right now, and I haven't come up with any final designs to come back and talk to anybody about it, but I think we have some great opportunities for that. And so with that, we'll continue to move for our grand opening. Will probably be sometime in August, September of 2008, because the completion date is July the 15th of next year. That's kind of quick, giving you a synopsis of it, but I thought you'd find it interesting just to see some of the things we're doing on the construction site. Any questions?
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it.
Thank you, David.
Not any more questions? I'm done.
You're done. Thanks. Okay, after the capital improvement status report, next comes the consent agenda. The consent agenda tonight is considered to be self-explanatory and will be enacted by the council with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. Approval of the consent agenda authorizes the city manager to implement each item in accordance with staff or board recommendations. Tonight, we have removed items 3 and 4 from the consent agenda, so the consent agenda will consist of items 2, 5, and 6. I'll now entertain a motion to dispose. Councilman Haltom.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve numbers 2, 5, and 6 of the consent agenda as presented.
Mr. Sutton.
That's a second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda consisting of items 2, 5, and 6. Any discussion? Please register your vote. That is unanimous. Item 3 is a boundary adjustment, ordinance number O-2007-025-01. This is consideration and interaction regarding the approval of second reading of an ordinance regarding mutual boundary adjustment with the city of Richland Hills. Again, this is second reading. And I see the mayor of Richland Hills, Honorable Dave Reagan. Dave, you have some words for us?
If you would like, we have a... Yeah, David, they had a PowerPoint on that thing. I didn't realize you were shutting it down.
If y'all would like
Just remind the council, I gave this to y'all in the session that really kind of responded to Councilman Sutton's query earlier, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Mayor. I just wanted to, before he got to putting that thing away, I wanted to see.
You don't want to make a.
It's up to Councilman Sutton. He had a small question,
Sure.
and we provided the answer, which I think the council all
Well,
has.
you went the trouble of preparing it. Why don't we see it?
It's only 4
I think
slides.
I think it's good slides to see.
You're getting a lot of
I'm sorry,
slides
David.
tonight. I'm sorry, Garrett speaking.
Well, hang
You're
on.
getting a lot of slides tonight. That's fine. I can forego that. Jim? Yeah, I think, the question, just for the record, was a small piece of land south of where the apartments and that vacant strip is.
Correct.
On an aerial. There are 2 major sanitary lines through there, one serving your city, North Richland Hills, and ourselves, and one that's a lateral out of Richland Hills. And actually, as you can see from what I provided, those lines actually are on the back side of the levee itself. That area is part of the federal flood control project, and the property is owned by Richland Hills. I think that was the
Right,
question.
and
Okay.
you guys own that.
Yes, sir.
And the piping under there, and you have charge of it from the Corps of Engineers also, I believe?
The strange situation, and you're dealing, your previous presentation, in the case of the Big Fossil Creek floodway in the city of Richland Hills, the city of Richland Hills actually either owns or has surface rights to the entire floodway. Those particular tracts we do own, including the minerals.
Okay.
Where that little piece is.
Right.
So actually, I did go out there, and in terms of land that isn't part of the levee, it's about 4 feet wide, and the sewer line's in it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right, then we'll consider action on item 3, the boundary adjustment. Entertain a motion to dispose. Mr. Sutton.
Okay, I move to approve ordinance number O-2007-02501 boundary agreement, City of Richland Hills, second reading, based upon the information that was brought back to the council.
And Mr. Colano.
That's for a second, Mayor.
Been moved and seconded to approve the ordinance number O-2007-025-01 on second reading. Any further discussion? Please register your vote. And that is unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you.
And thank you, Mayor and Council. We appreciate the vote, and we'd like to have you for our neighbor.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Have a good holiday, Jim. Next on the agenda is item 4. This is resolution number R2007-024-01. Consideration for Tarrant Appraisal District Board of Directors election. And someone, okay, Mr. Hutchinson, you want to make a nomination?
Yes, there, as we've been given, there are 6 candidates for the 5 slots, and Haltom City has 17 votes to cast. We could split it up among all the candidates, however we choose, or we could give our votes to one candidate, and the 17 votes are in the midst of some 1,250 votes of all of the surrounding Tarrant County area for the Tarrant County Appraisal District. I make a motion that we apply all 17 votes to Ms. Dion Bagsby, candidate Bagsby.
Okay, we have a second. Mr. Holcomb.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to cast Haltom City's 17 votes for the Tarrant Appraisal District Board of Directors election to Dion Bagsby. Any discussion? Please register your vote. That is unanimous. Under the regular agenda tonight, have one item, flooding and erosion issues, updated discussion on recent flooding and erosion issues. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. When the last council meeting, I briefed y'all on how the staff was going to be down at the Skyline Banner area on the following day. And we were down there. We took a couple of days to pick up that was debris that was down there, and we did that. And consequently, since we've been down there, more debris has shown up, just as we suspected it would. At the time, there were about 25 homes that were still there, that were not livable, but were still there, and that was something that we weren't going to be able to take any action with. We were going to have to ultimately take to the housing board. Pleased to say that number's been reduced to 8 properties, of which 6 still have structures on them, and they will be taken to the housing board on the 18th of December for official condemnation of those homes, and then it'll be up to the owners, or most likely it'll be up to us to do that. The condemnation that the housing board will take actually gives us the ability to go in there and do that. And we'll, if we end up doing that, we'll assess liens on the properties to take care of those properties and cleaning them up. Now, the balance of the properties we're still working with FEMA on. Again, what we were able to do a couple of weeks ago, we're only dealing with the debris that was piled up at the curb. We couldn't deal with anything that was particularly off the curb. And FEMA reps were down there telling us what we could take and what we couldn't take. And it was very frustrating because there was stuff there that we wanted to take, that we could have taken, that we thought we could have taken, that they told us we couldn't take. So we're still dealing with that. But I think we made some good strides. It looks a bit different than what it did before, but there's not to say that's not still a problem. There's still problems down there. And the Association of Skyline, the Skyline Mobile Home Park Association, put up gates, as we've briefed the council on the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure how effective they are because of about where they put the gates. The gates are probably a little too far down the hill. They need to be closer up to where the homes are to keep people from driving around the gates. But maybe we need to put some cable fencing around there to help keep people out. But it's still a problem there. As the Corps, Mr. Tidwell with the COG mentioned about the hazard mitigation program, we have made an application with that regarding Skyline and also regarding Fenway as well. But that is still tracking. We're still working with those guys on that. So as far as Skyline, that's pretty much all I've got on Skyline. If there's any questions on that. No? Yes?
You mentioned something about cable fencing.
Yeah.
How are we as a city going to get away with putting that on?
We're not going to do it. It'd be something the Mobile Home Park Association would do.
That's kind of what I thought. Thank you.
I'm not a fan of it because I think it creates other liability issues that I've seen have a tremendous negative impact in another community that I worked in. I'm not a fan of it, but it is a cheap, somewhat effective way to deal with the problem that's going on down there. But I mentioned that, and maybe I shouldn't have mentioned that. We talked about that today when we were kind of talking about where we go from here with the Skyline stuff, the Skyline, the banner stuff, because it's, do we expect more accountability out of the Mobile Home Association? I think at some point someone's going to have to. We can't keep coming in and doing it. So at some point it's going to have to be. And maybe the point is after the housing board does its action and after the consequent action that they're going to be taking, if they do choose to affirmatively condemn those properties, and that somebody goes in there, whether it's the owners or if it's us, somebody goes in there and takes care of those properties, then once everything is cleaned up, then there's going to have to be something done, something to secure it, something to do it, because as far as any hazard mitigation, at least for the Skyline banner area, it's not going to be coming until summer at the earliest. As far as funds that are going to be needed to help with buying those properties out and removing them from the floodway.
Mr. Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Muir, you mentioned that there were things that the FEMA would not allow the city to haul off as a part of the trash pickup when we went down there. Will that become a part of the condemnation process if those properties are the ones that that are liable for that?
That, as I understand it, it probably would not be, but there's another way we can deal with that. But it would not be something through the housing board because it's debris. The housing board is only dealing with a structure that is there. What we're talking about, what FEMA wouldn't allow us to do is debris, piles of debris that were piled there, but they were not piled in such a way that we had the legal ability or the owner's permission to go onto their property to go get it. If it was pushed out to the curb or something along those lines, then they were going to give us that leeway. Well, technically, we're going to be on their property, we could be able to take it. If it's 50 feet into the property, they're not going to let us take it. I'd say if it's even 20 feet away from it, I'm not sure that they would let us take it. We thought we knew what we could take when we started this thing. We were talking with FEMA in getting all this issues set up to do this debris cleanup. And then when it comes time to where we got our guys out there mobilized, we got the roll-offs from the solid waste company there. We're actually doing the job. They're telling us, you can't do this, you can't do that. And it's mainly because what we've got a legal ability to go in there and take, because we don't have that. Housing board's not going to condemn a pile of debris. Well, it may be just debris. It's got to be the actual structure that's there. But there may be other ways to tackle that.
Well, clearly the owners intended that as debris. How could FEMA not see that as debris?
I can appreciate that. Don't shoot the messenger, man. I'm just trying to. I don't understand what these guys do some of the time either way. Anyway, any more questions on the Skyline banner area? Okay. Regarding Big Fossil, I don't really have much else to tell, at least publicly out here. As I stated before, we are working through the hazard mitigation program with some issues there. Again, the issue with it, with it being erosion and the properties, the homes up there are not technically being in the floodway or floodplain up there at the time. That presents other issues, but there are things that we have been working on that I'll brief you all on here in a little while. Do have well, I don't have anything else to report tonight that I'm ready to do publicly. No.
Tom, I do have a follow-up question. Earlier, some mention was made during the capital improvement status report that I think it was alleged that there were two areas here that Haltom City was involved in, and that was the letting people live down in the floodway down there in the Skyline banner area, and the other was letting developers build houses up on the hill up there above up there in the Fenway area. Now, my understanding is that there's I've not seen any discussion that would say in any way, shape, form, fashion that a developer or the city erred in letting developers develop that area in Fenway. I mean, it's can you comment on that?
Sure.
I was not aware of any.
No, I'm not willing to say there were errors done. I think in hindsight, I mean, if you want to look back,
sure.
Monday morning quarterback it, you can question the decisions that were made, but between FEMA and all the drainage studies that were done, as near as we can tell with the development, everything was done properly. Now, what wasn't taken into account at the time is more than likely is the amount of development was going to be handled upstream, and the type of rain event or rain events. This was, while FEMA is calling it an event, it was several events all clustered together. That's going to be a problem anywhere. I think there's also been comment that the properties were built up there, and I think I've even said that from time to time. But I'm now thinking now they weren't. They were built up a couple of feet, but the trees that were up there, they're more than 10 years old. They're considerably more than 10-year-old trees. There's probably some areas that were built up a little bit, but it wasn't built up the 20, 10, 20, 30 feet that some people were talking about. I just don't see that. But I can't. And some of the other issues with those things, you're dealing with in a community, not just our community. This is a regional effort. It's kind of like you hear us talk about transportation being regional. This issue is really kind of a regional issue because we have so many communities kind of closely clustered together. We got over 40 cities in this county. Well, more than any other county in the country has that many cities clustered in the county. And you're dealing with the development regulations of all these different cities. So is there going to be accountability to each of the cities downstream for that? Well, probably not. And you probably don't have this problem in a lot of these other communities because they don't have the number of communities that are so tightly fitted together. Not giving that as an excuse. I'm just kind of thought of that as it's just the way it is for here. You don't see it in some of the other areas because they're bigger areas that are all following the same development codes. And while each of the cities probably have very similar development codes, as far as being accountable to each other, that's something that they have not done. And you and I have talked about, why can't they be accountable to us upstream? And that's what you've heard Mr. Tidwell talking about here today. Is that's something they're trying to get to happen. Now that's probably something that certainly should have been going on back then, because whether it was Big Fossil with the folks at Fenway and Bridgeport or Skyline, I mean, it wasn't so much of a problem until there was development further upstream, whether it's coming out of Keller and Watauga or whether it's coming out of Hazlitt and Fort Worth. The more you build, and especially with Big Fossil Creek, with all the building going out there, Hazlitt and Fort Worth and Saginaw and stuff, what they're going to be doing, or probably going to be doing. I don't know what they're going to be doing. That's the problem. We don't know what they're going to do. And I know the Richland Hills mayor is gone now, but I'm sure they've had issues with it, but it's slowed down considerably because it's come to our town, and we've slowed it down because everything's bottled up here. So that's a long answer to your question. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate it. I just thought we needed to say something about that and just not leave just that hanging out there.
Yeah.
Any other discussion or comments or questions on the flooding and erosion issue?
Well, just a aside, what I thought I might as well go ahead and say it publicly. As far as our bridges, we have gotten some grant reimbursement approval on repairing our bridges of the Glenview and Broadway. And that'll be something we'll start negotiating with an engineer to design those changes here fairly soon, and hopefully bring a contract back to y'all in January to start that process. And we've also been approved for some reimbursement funds for the work that we did on the low water crossing at Big Fossil and mitigating and fixing that issue since the floods. This is just downstream from the folks at the Fenway Court Bridgeport area. So that was some good news that we'll get some reimbursement funds there.
That water crossing, that's in the park.
That's in the park. Yeah. That's city stuff, but FEMA's going to be able to reimburse us for that.
Mr. Sutton.
That's good. That's good to hear. Some of the residents are here. They may want to comment on some of the recent erosion that has taken place, just to keep that front and center. Did anyone? Fantastic.
Our resident engineer.
Yeah. Robert Friedel, 5760 Fenway Court. Hadn't been here in a couple of months, I guess. I just wanted to update y'all that in my backyard, we have additional cracks forming. Just wanted y'all to know that in case for public knowledge that y'all keep that consideration. The cracks are similar to what happened probably in early June, probably 2 or 3 weeks before the big slide occurred. So it's my opinion that the next significant rainfall event we have, it's going to be a large section that's going to go in my backyard. So just wanted y'all to be aware of that. The grass is actually separating the roots, so all the signs are there. It's not slowing down. So that was it. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Any other comments or questions from the from the audience or from the dais? Okay. Thank you, Tom. We'll move on to the Visitor Citizens Forum. This time is set aside for any person having business before the council that is not scheduled on the agenda to speak to the council. All comments must be directed to the presiding officer rather than an individual council member or staff. Each speaker must limit his or her comments to the subject matter listed on the speaker's request form and must refrain from personal attacks toward any individual. Council cannot discuss or debate any issue brought forth at this time, nor can any formal action be taken as it is not a posted agenda item in accordance with the Open Meetings Law. Have anyone want to speak for the Visitor Citizen Forum tonight? Yes, sir. Please identify yourself.
Bob Watkins, 6140 Blue Spruce Circle. I addressed a couple of you last week about this sitting here. I think you're dissing the few people, me and Mr. Jardinay, with the ones I can see tonight. But if we want to watch this on television, I pay extra every month so that my wife can watch it on television. But I want to come here and I want to see. I don't want you to get the big head, Mayor, but I'd like to see your expression. And anybody that's standing here blocks the expression. And any place you sit in the house, it's going to block somebody's expression. And I couldn't decide whether to talk tonight, but real early on I decided, because we had a couple of gentlemen up here that received an award, and we had a room full of people back here that did not get to see what these people looked like when they got presented their proclamation. So there's a lot of downsides, and if one of y'all would step out here if you'd like to and see how this rolls. It doesn't actually, the picture doesn't roll, but there's something fog that rolls over it, so you can't see what somebody's saying. And you, in most of the chairs in this house, I guess you could sit somewhere in here and probably see something, but in most of the chairs in the house, the people in the audience can't make the decision, which, as I said, if I wanted to not make a decision, I'd sit home. But you can't make the decision of, what's Councilmember Reese thinking, what's Councilmember Sutton thinking. Don't get to see you go like that, then I don't know what you're thinking, and I just think this is a real poor idea. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for the Visitor Citizens Forum tonight? Seeing none, I'll close this portion of the agenda and go to item 8, resignation of board members. Do we have any resignations? Seeing none, we'll move to item 9, appointment or reappointments to board. Any appointments? Seeing none, we'll move to item 10, excused absence of council members. As I said earlier, we have Councilmember Diane Branson with a family emergency. Mr. Hutchison.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make a motion that we approve Councilperson Branson's absence as an excused absence.
Mr. Sutton.
Grateful that Clay is back home, but hoping for a speedy recovery. I second that motion.
Okay, been moved and seconded to excuse the absence of Councilmember Branson. Please register your vote. That is unanimous. Next item on the agenda is the executive session under authority of section 551-071-072 and -074. We will now go into executive session. Do you guys need a few minutes? We'll make it at 8:30. We'll convene in executive session. Thank you. Okay, we're back in regular session at 10:13 p.m. After executive session, there is no action to take as a result of executive session. This meeting is adjourned.